I want to go as far as to say like the old playbook should entirely be thrown out. What I am very confident in is that the old playbook doesn't work like it used to.
A lot of leaders need to always have a very critical eye of what they see online about these new playbooks and all of that stuff, and think, okay, how would that actually work for a company like me?
I'm often curious about, the psychology of, let's say, anybody who recognizes there's a solution out there is not doing anything about it. Everybody has access to the same tools. Like what happened to Signal?
If you really want to stand out, custom signals is the way to go.
What is one metric you feel like all founders should not even concentrate on?
What we should strive for is qualified pipeline, basically, at the early stage.
I think people are fearful that AI is going to take sellers' job. But we still need sellers and people to be on the empathetic side to have that human in the loop.
This episode came together almost by accident. After recording a bunch of conversations over the last few months, I kept noticing the same pattern. Different founders, different companies, different stages, but everyone was quietly admitting the same thing. What used to work in GTM does not anymore. The playbooks feel outdated, the advice feels recycled. Everyone's using AI, yet most teams are still struggling to create real pipeline. And buyers, they're faster, more skeptical, and way harder to impress. So instead of forcing another framework episode this week, we went back and pulled out the moments that actually mattered. The part where people paused, challenged old assumptions, or said something uncomfortable but true. This episode is a compilation of all those moments. You'll hear how people are thinking about relevance over volume, why more tools are not fixing broken GTMs, what AI is actually good for you right now, and where teams are still lying to themselves on what's working. Things as behind-the-scenes conversation across multiple episodes. No fluff, no motivational nonsense, just real GTM thinking from people in the trenches. And if this kind of conversation is useful, if you want more deep dives like this, future episodes and breakdowns you can actually apply, consider subscribing. All right, let's get right into it.
I want to go as far as to say like the old playbook should entirely be thrown out. What I am very confident in is that the old playbook doesn't work like it used to. I think like inboxes are just inundated. Spam, capture is very powerful. We try to use AI to write emails, but Microsoft and Google are using AI to, deter spam from getting in their inboxes. So I think it's more important than ever. The bar is higher than ever to actually send relevant messages to people at the right time with a relevant offer and add value. It's scaling creativity, in my opinion. Like that's the thing that it's doing I think it's scaling. It's doing the thing that you were going to do manually, but it's helping you scale it. It's helping you find more leverage in that thing. And again, I think I come back to, I say the expression like creative and thoughtful campaigns or creative and thoughtful plays. I think like the one that you just gave is a perfect example of that. And there's like a couple layers to it. It's also like, I want to like, in any outreach that I'm doing, as it relates to like pipe gen or retention plays, like what is the thing that's actually valuable to that person? What is the thing that would be like they would pay money for that thing? And that's a hard thing to think through. Like that's not like, when I ask people that, most people don't have a quick answer to that, because I think we're just trained to say like, hey, take this $100 gift card to see a meeting. Like that's the best idea that people come up with. Or like, these 3 companies in your industry use us, right? Like insert social proof here and we can help save 50% time, right? Value prop. And do you want to spend 30 minutes with me? It's like, no, I don't want to spend 30 minutes with you. I don't want to see any more demos. That's not the world we live in. We're not running the 2022 playbook. And so trying to think through the offer. Alex Hormozy, who's kind of kooky, but I think like has some good stuff, has a book, I think it's called $100 Million Offers.
Yeah,
and
I love that book. I'm reading it as we speak.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's a great book. And it's like a good framework of, it's like internet marketing stuff, but I think B2B SaaS should learn from it. It's like this offer, this idea that like an offer should be so good that you'd be stupid to refuse it. And like, that's a great question to ask before you hit send on a cold email or before you dial a cold call or before you do a gifting campaign. It's like, is this offer, is the thing that the call to action so good that somebody would be stupid to refuse it? Like most messages that I see, most messages that I've sent in the last few years are the answer to that is no. And so I think that's a good framework to have as you're building out emotion. And the thing that I'm starting to test with, and we'll see how it goes, but one thing that has been fun to tinker with at least is vibe coding something that is valuable to them. So doing some sort of like, the old school like HubSpot grader, website grader thing, kind of like a spin on that would be like for a security company, it's like put in your domain and we'll show you a health score of your security process internally. Or, for like a company that does call recordings and pushes to Salesforce, it's like authenticate to your CRM and we'll give you a health score of your CRM. If you send that and you can vibe code that thing. I can vibe code that thing and I can't write a line of code using something like Lovable. That is super valuable to a RevOps person, but saying like, hey, we take call recordings and push it to fields in Salesforce so that your fields are always up to date. Like that's not super valuable to them. But if they get something and they can, in a couple of clicks, see I've got 2,200 duplicate accounts in my CRM and only a 64% fill rate for medic fields, that's pretty interesting for them. They're going to say, okay, yeah, sure, I'll spend 30 minutes or an hour with this person and learn more about how they can help fix that problem for me. So I think there's just like a whole new, the aperture has widened on what is possible now. And I think the bar has just gone up. And so I think that's like an important framework to have. On the LinkedIn side of things, I also, when I was at Groundswell, I stopped doing all cold outbound and just doubled down on LinkedIn content because it just worked. Like my market was on LinkedIn and it was free. I enjoyed doing it. I got a lot of learning, especially early stage. I would learn a lot about the market that I was selling into, how to position in the market, et cetera. So there's a lot of like tangential things of value in doing that. It was good for hiring. It was good for fundraising. There's a lot of kind of byproducts of making noise on LinkedIn. And so I'm like very bullish on that as a channel and it's like sort of cringy, but it is what it is. I think it's a great channel that people are definitely like waking up to it as a channel and starting to like put real resources behind it. But I think it's still underrated and you have to have good content. You have to I don't think AI slop, like I don't think that works on LinkedIn. I don't ever like, I don't know, maybe it sort of does, but you have to have something unique to say. And so I do think there's like sort of still a moat around that channel. And I think it's definitely worth investing in as like a marketing channel that will work for the next couple of years. Yeah. So there's a couple things that come to mind immediately. I think by the way, the thing that I find in the work that I do is the best ideas I can't come up with as an external person. I don't think you can like outsource AI strategy because it is basically scaling best practices. And I don't know, like I happen to know your space a little bit because I've been in the space, but like when I work with somebody that's selling software for, retailers, it's like, I don't really know that much about that space. And like, I need to extract the best practices from that person or that founder and then scale it. So that's the first thing is like, that's a good Turing test for me to know, like, is this a good idea? It's like, I can't come up with it, that the company, you have to come up with it. But I'll brainstorm with you because I think it's a helpful exercise. So, and one more thing I'll say is the other thing that I'll do is I'll just interview to that end. I'll interview the founder and or the best salespeople. And I'll just say, what do you do? When you're going to research a company, what do you look for? And that it's kind of 10 or 20 minute back and forth is really helpful. Share your screen. Okay, pull up a website. Cool. I'll give you a real example. This rep pulled up a website. They scroll to this, they sell like a security product. They scroll to the bottom of the website and they said, okay, I'm going to find the security docs. And it was, clicked a link and then it was whatever the domain was / security. Okay, cool. Now I'm looking on this page and I'm looking for a couple of things. One, I'm going to scroll either at the top or the bottom and I'm going to see when it was last updated. I didn't know this was a thing, but you can see on privacy docs, probably for compliance, it shows printed on the website. It says last updated date. And they want to see, was this updated in the last 30 days or something like this? I forget the exact time frame. That's one interesting data point for them. A second thing this person did was they said, okay, I'm going to go find an email address on this privacy doc page. And whether it's like, security@okta.com or something is like interesting versus Jane@okta.com or Jane at, I don't know, there's some other email address, like I forget what it is, like heuristic that is interesting. That's the second interesting data point for the rep. Then the third thing is they inspect page, right? They right click and they inspect the page and they see what are the tools that this company is using for security. Are they using 1Pass or are they using like security things on the website? Do they have pixels on the website? And that's interesting. And then they're like, then I go to SimilarWeb and I see how many monthly unique visitors do they have, right? So you can see here, this is now taking 5 minutes or more to get all of these little data points for this one company. And so now what we're doing is we're just building this into a workflow that is saying, okay, I want this AI agent to go to this website, look for these specific things. It's going to be different for every company, by the way. It's not going to always be /privacy. It might be /privacy page or privacy docs or privacy policy or whatever. Some websites might not have that on the homepage, et cetera, which is also an interesting signal. And so you could just basically train it to get all of these data points for this one company. And then using Clay or Cargo or N8N or Make, there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but you can, Zoom, Info, and Apollo are also trying to do this, Unify, Common Room, et cetera. You can then do this at scale. I'm finding, at least today, to get really bespoke custom data, you need to like kind of hand roll it yourself. So it's hard to use kind of an out of the box tool and say like, hey, I want these 4 data points on every company. It just doesn't quite work. Maybe in a couple of years it will. There's a lot of venture dollars going towards it and smart people working on that problem. Maybe ChatGPT could just one prompt, one shot, like these are the 4 data points I want on 350,000 companies. Maybe. But anyway, today you have to kind of custom build this. And then you just hit run. You just give it a list of 300,000 domains and you hit run and you've got data points on all of those things. Then you can have like another column in Clay or wherever that is like a point system or a scoring model that says, hey, look at, the previous 5 columns and the data in them and tell me is it a high fit, medium fit, or low fit account based on, my business model. And this wasn't possible 2 years ago. I couldn't imagine a world being able to do this. I would often hire, maybe somebody that was like a consultant that would do this, or maybe an outsourced worker to do this. Now it's like, we can do this with 99% accuracy when the data exists. And, it can be expensive depending on the data that you're trying to pull. But it's magic. It's like, it's insane leverage that like, I do believe, last thing I'll say is I do think that like companies that are able to put aside their ego, like speaking for myself again, like I think I have had to put aside my ego in a way that I haven't had to do in many years. And I continue to like say, okay, I can't have an ego in this. Like I have to ask like, why do you need JSON output in a prompt? And it's like, whether I'm asking that publicly, ask that to a friend or ask that to AI, I can't have any ego in it because again, this is all new. And so I think companies, revenue leaders, go-to-market leaders that don't have an ego and are willing to experiment on this stuff and are willing to test and are willing to like not have it be perfect. I think these are the companies that are going to excel over the next couple of years. And the people that are just running the same playbook, I think it's going to be clear in a couple of years, like they are going to get lapped by the companies that are adopting this new way of doing things.
Amazing.
I think warm intros is very interesting, using your network. I think using first-party data, so signals, I think you should think about how to automate using signals. I do think that's going to commoditize over time. And I see some chatter of like, oh, everybody's going to do this. It's still really hard to do. It's really hacky and like, it's hard to actually operationalize signals in a smart and thoughtful way. So I think it's worth doing. I do think in a couple of years, like vendors will make it so that it's kind of one click.
Yeah. So what we try to optimize for at Swan basically is the amount of touch points required to get an amount of ACV. Okay, so you take these 2 factors, the average contract value and the total touch points that are required to get that. And what you need to find is that sweet spot with the lowest touch points and the highest ACV you can generate. Okay. And when you look at that, it's not a question of how many accounts like that. Just a question of which accounts you should go after, basically. And when you focus more on the type of accounts that really fits into the lowest amount of touch points and highest ACV, then you can play more, lean into a precision game. And it depends on where you at. If you have a very low ACD, so you can have a transactional business, that's okay. Maybe 2 touch points and you closed it, and that's fine. And then so you're leaning more towards volume in some sense, but you know exactly which businesses these are. And so you're aiming for maybe a bigger volume of a specific type of businesses. And you're still trying to be accurate, but you have a bigger funnel because it's more of a transaction. If the ACD is higher, then it requires more touch points. And again, maybe the funnel is smaller, the volume is smaller, and you're still playing the precision game. So the thing is, you should always obsess about which accounts should I go after. If you have a huge TAM and you're serving 1,000 to 5,000 companies, employee companies in North America, that's it. And that's a huge red flag for an early stage startup. You should be obsessing about a very specific niche within that market, doubling down on them, because you know that for the time being, they are the ones that enable you to scale the fastest because it's the lowest touch points, the lowest amount of touch points with the highest ACV.
Makes sense. Is it safe to say you're referring to quantity of quality? Like you need quality accounts, but at the same time, then you need to think about how would you increase the quantity?
Yes, definitely. You always, if my philosophy is, you always try to find the best version of something. You obsess about that, and then you try to scale it, right? So it's quality over quantity, because first you want to understand how does quality look like in the best way. And after that, you focus on scaling that and on quantity. And the go-to-market is always a zero-sum game, basically. You're fighting over the attention of the buyer and the budget of the buyer. It doesn't matter. It's not about competition. It's about attention and budget. These are the ones, the resources that you're really fighting for. And the competition is fierce. There's like so many people, so many companies who are fighting over the attention of the buyer and their budget, basically. And you should always think, how can you get an unfair advantage over all these competitors when trying to get attention and trying to get access to the budget? And with attention, if you just focus on quantity first before quality, then you're just going to lose the attention game, basically. And same thing goes with the budget afterwards. Because if you have an ICP that you have an amazing value proposition for, all your messaging is aligned for them, then you can have better access to their budget as well. So all your business aligns around that, and it's much easier to scale. And people think that having a bigger TAM enables them to scale faster. That's false. It's not the truth, actually. It's good to have a potential huge market to expand into eventually. If you're building a startup and you want to build a multi-billion-dollar company, then eventually you need to scale to a multi-billion market. But it doesn't mean that you need to serve that market at day one. It's actually the opposite. You should be focusing on a niche market that you could serve well in a repeatable manner, and that your messaging, value proposition, product, onboarding, sales materials, everything are aligned around this specific niche.
Got it. Since looks like you're rewriting the whole GTM playbook almost here, tell me if some of the matrix which you believe has already died, but most people have not accepted it, or you think it should just die by now. For example, one of the things you mentioned is having a large TAM does not really help because of the obvious reasons you mentioned. What is one metric you feel like all founders should not even concentrate on?
Yeah, so activities, right? So a lot of people just try to focus on the amount of activities that they have in some way or another, how many emails are we sending? How many times are we picking up the phone, we're calling people, how many leads we're engaging, etc. And even, how many meetings booked is not a metric to really obsess about. What we should strive for is, qualified pipeline, basically at the early stage. And if we're losing still in the world where we have a lot of qualified pipeline, it just means that we have a very weak business offering. We need to fix something very core of the business. If you're losing a qualified pipeline, it's not a go-to-market problem. Basically, it's product, it's a business, it's a strategy, it's a very fundamental problem to your business if you're losing qualified pipeline, basically. And there's like other challenges that you need to focus on, not concerning go-to-market. But if you're obsessing about qualified pipeline and you find a way to scale that in a very efficient manner, then you won the go-to-market game. That's basically what you're trying to get to. And the biggest challenge that I see with growing startups is that there's a misalignment between all the functions within go-to-market around qualified pipeline. Because you have marketing, they're obsessing about MQLs, right? Marketing qualified leads. And you have SDRs who are obsessing about meetings booked. And AEs, they just care about closing, getting to the quota, basically hitting quota. And so where you have this fragmented attribution model and fragmented incentives model, then that's where a lot of problems get escalated. And so what you need to do as a founder or a go-to-market leader is try to align all of the functions around qualified pipeline and initially around quality and understanding the best process that we can have with as much human in the loop as possible. And then after we nail that, try to scale it with AI enhancement and AI collaboration and automation, etc. If you have a strong signal that tells you that the account is in consideration, then you should have 4 or 5 step sequence to get the best personalized offering to the right people within the organization, right? And that's the hottest opportunity.
I think a lot of leaders need to always have a very critical eye of what they see online about these new playbooks and all of that stuff, and think, okay, how would that actually work for a company like me that has our ideal customer profile is CEOs of FTSE 500 companies. Yeah, it's my big piece on this. It's got to come from the C-level, and it's got to come from the C-level understanding the revenue contribution that the SDR team is contributing. A big problem is because I haven't been coached well enough is SDR leaders talking inputs and kind of pre-opportunity stage. They feel like because they're responsible for getting those meetings, that's what they should be focusing on. But it's really the execs don't care. Execs do not care about the amount of dials that you make if you're generating millions of dollars in pipeline and millions of dollars of revenue. And so leaders have got to really change how they communicate to their execs, but also the execs as well have got to also understand the critical nature of the role, and then you can meet in the middle in terms of making those changes. I hear it often, I've experienced it, where leaders are asking, okay, well, how many calls are we making? And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Does not mean anything. It's about how many, it's that piece about what's our pipeline contribution against the total number? What's our revenue contribution against the number? Those are the things that we should really be focusing on. It's a real change management needed from the exec down.
Thank you. David, you've been running so many communities. In your communities, I'm pretty sure by now you must see a split. What I mean by that is, are SDR leaders actually using AI in the workflows, or are most still stuck in, let's wait for the RevOps or company or somebody else to tell us?
In the US, there are a lot more, they're trying to get stuff going and implementing those workflows. Europe is always 18 months, 2 years behind. And in terms of adoption. And also there's a lot more conservative of a small C approach in terms of as we mentioned earlier, around governance and privacy. And so US is doing it. EMEA is still watching and going, okay, when can we do this? What can we do? I think next year in Europe, it'll be a lot more of this kind of, right, let's do this. But it just means, though, that companies that have got their act together already are going to have a huge head start. and have taken that market share. So like next year's too late. And so I think that's what I really seeing from both sides of in Europe and in the Americas as well.
Wow. Okay. So did I hear that right? That you said next year onwards, Europe will also be at par with US in terms of adoption?
It will never be on par. It'll just be where where America was at the start of this year is where Europe mid of next year will start to be. And it's always the same. And this is the big reason for having the community that we have, is trying to elevate our leaders to think, not to wait, but really take control of these things and these projects and these initiatives, because you need to speed this up. No one's going to speed it up for you. You can't wait. You have to drive the change internally.
Gotcha. I mean, I like that perspective. That you're trying to obviously elevate all the leaders community, but is there anything else which is happening in Europe because of which you believe that that gap will reduce?
Yeah, so I know it's happened. It's happened already in the US in terms of call ID. That's a big thing whereas cold calling is potentially marked as spam in the US. Those kind of legislations are going to be coming in as well in Europe as well. And there's simple things that you can do to make sure that your number has been registered, so that then when somebody calls, it's not going to look like a spam number in Europe. Like, it's just be a number. And doing those kind of tweaks now is going to help you a lot when it comes to, if you're making calls and if you're trying to engage with prospects, making those connection rings be higher. And that's something that can be done. And you can use that kind of AI analysis to see, okay, where is the is our connection rate lower? Why is that? And then making those tweaks and then seeing that connection rate increase.
What do you think top leaders are actually doing differently with AI right now that you feel laggards are kind of flat out missing?
They've looked at their whole workflow from lead sourcing that over to even to revenue closed. They've mapped it out, what their existing process is, and then they've looked at, okay, what tools do we currently have in place for those things? And then they're going out to market, and now the leaders need to be having demo calls with products and solutions. They need to figure out, if this is our use case, if this is our flow, what can we do to optimize this? And it's tough. Leaders are on calls every hour of every day, but they really need to break out some time once a week for a couple of hours to really understand what's going on in the market, then seeing how they can implement that in their flow. That's what the best leaders are doing, is they're looking at that on a quarterly basis. Where can we improve? Where can we get those efficiencies? And those are the ones that are accelerating. And the ones, again, that don't do that and haven't got that very clear flow of what their process is and how they can optimize it, they're the ones that are really being left behind.
I'm often curious about, the psychology of, let's say, anybody who recognizes there's a solution out there is not doing anything about it. And since you work closely with these SDR leaders, why do you think they're not able to do it? Or why do you think they're not doing it at all?
Yeah, so I had an idea at the start of the summer about a gap that I thought was in the market. And then in the space of 2 months, I had 3 vendors approach me to ask me about this idea that they had, and they'd kind of got pre-seed funding. And so I think there are things out there in development. So my piece was, okay, if you have a sales call or a BDR has a prospect call, how can you get those call notes and get them automatically uploaded into your CRM? And then how can you then put that then into your pipeline review workflow, and have those intent signals and showing, okay, this needs to move and progress. I think they are happening, but it's slow uptake, because again, companies are very, I'm not sure really what we should be doing in terms of our AI strategy. So I think it's just that. And also there's been a lot of investment in solutions that are not going to be picked up as a whole and adopted as a whole. So I think there's just that kind of companies that are in that point of AI saying like, yeah, this actually would really work. I don't know if there's like VCs are just a bit like, okay, hold on for a little bit. We've invested a lot in other tools. Companies are a bit, I'm not sure about this. It's a bit too much. So I think there's a lot of stuff coming down the line, but I don't know if I just think it is a case of super early in their adoption phase?
I've gotten in arguments with my LLM. I mean, sometimes where I put my Facebook relationship status as it's complicated. No, I just think, complexity wise, it's really hard, right? When you look at my level of expertise, like I said, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a developer. So I try to get the most out of an LLM that I can. I think let's take, for example, like the forecaster gem that I built. When we first started forecasting, it was a pretty detailed exercise. There were a lot of steps. There were a lot of considerations, a lot of places that data stood that we had to view and, pull together. If I was some sort of coder developer, I could probably code something, Python, whatever, and connect all of those objects together, right? And, create a script for us to pull that information and make it much easier. But I didn't. So I had to go back and forth with AI a lot of times and get it to get the output that I want. And it was hard because AI is not human. And I think that's what people see AI as, like replacing humans. But it's so important to have the human in the loop element to it's never going to get the true like conditional logic. I mean, we got it to a really good point, but there were so many times in that building that it's like, no, you're not getting it. Like, I'm going to pause. We're going to take a break and I'll come back to you tomorrow and you better be ready. Like, like that's how I converse with AI. Like people, if you saw some of my chats when I'm building, you're like, what's wrong with this dude? It's hard. It's hard. But in the end, it makes it worth it. Cause now that forecaster gem, it accounts for all of our different quotas across segments. It accounts for quarterly reps. It accounts for monthly reps. And you can do one screenshot, give one little prediction, and then it generates your whole walk up and, percent to goal in 2 minutes. So it's like, it's definitely frustrating. And sometimes you feel like giving up, but I think it's best when you can just take a break, pause for a second, come back fresh and think, okay, let's start. These are the problems we're having. I've had instances where I've taken a prompt. I've noticed over time, it wasn't like generating how I wanted it to. I said, here's a good response. Here's a bad response. We need to shore up that every time we get the good response. So it's really just being collaborative. It's really using it as an assistant to help you get what you need. I think if you're frustrated, the best thing you can do is feed it more context as far as like, why are you frustrated? What responses are bad? What don't you like about this response?
Tell me something. I mean, you said earlier that AI can be a co-seller, but most reps are just using it to, write emails or doing basic stuff. One, I mean, I have a two-part question. Number one, what do you think they're missing? Second, what all is possible? Like given a seller, I mean, you just talked about a couple of use cases, like how you can use Gamma, how you have solved the forecasting process. I mean, imagine if you were a seller today. Where would you start? Of course, one is admin work. Find out where you're spending time. Solve that. All right, that's done. Now, as a seller, in order for you to be really, really successful, where would you start?
Good question. I don't want to give too in-depth of an answer, but like you push it to its limits, push AI to its limits, make it a copy of yourself, understanding that it's an expert in whatever you need to train it to do. Of course, the prompting comes in handy in that. But for instance, like, we often have difficult pricing conversations when it comes to renewal. Could be a change like on our end as it turns to like license structure, pricing, etc. Like those aren't easy conversations. So it's like, okay, again, I don't want to ping my manager every time I need to strategize a deal. I don't want to spend a lot of time just crunching numbers to try and figure out what makes sense. Let's create a deal strategist gem. Here's our pricing guidelines. Here's our rules of grants of authority document. Reference this document, go through the, current scope, what my goal is on the renewal, and help me come up with 2 creative proposals that I can present and instruct me if they need manager approval, they need director level approval, or if it's within my approval bound based on the pricing knowledge you have. It's trained on that. So then I can take that and it generates like the proposals, it gives me the ideas, and then it also frames the win-win and how to communicate it to the customer. And like people could say, well, that's not you doing the work, that's AI. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm feeding AI the context. It has the context into why I want to present this. It's using my knowledge and my expertise on how we typically approach these. And then it's crafting it in a way that's like, all right, we can get creative and offer this as a win-win. And since I've started doing that, the receptiveness towards like proposals when people see a price increase or just the way that framing works, it makes that conversation go so much smoother. But the pure beauty of like using these gems all together, even if negotiating, another shout out to Superhuman. I found Chris Voss call prep, which is Chris Voss is a famous FBI negotiator, right? A lot of great tactics in his book, Never Split the Difference. It was a prompt that was like, hey, prep for your calls using all of Chris Voss's tactics. I use that for so many of my deals just to get the framework of like the conversation down so I can label appropriately. So I can do like the accusation audit to reduce like the guard that the buyer has, right? And what's so nice about combining these is essentially for every deal, you can continue the chat. And just whenever an action takes place, whether it's an email or something imperative to the deal, you feed it to AI. And now you have an assistant for every single deal with all of the context of a deal that can help you navigate the deal and make sure that like the customer's heard. We understand what the problem and challenge is. This is how we're going to communicate it. This is how we're going to show ourselves as a true partner. It's come in handy so much to have all these chats saved. Like, that's what I say, push it to the limits. Like, it is your strategist for every single deal you can go through.
I mean, that is bringing me so many questions, but I'm going to just take to one. Have you developed, let's say, any custom prompt beyond the call prep that work particularly well for your sales approach?
Yeah, the deal strategist one, where it gives me like creative proposals and like to work through and get to our goal and frame the win-wins. Business case builder. How important are business cases to buyers? I mean, obviously you have to be a good sales rep to do good discovery and get some of those qualitative metrics, right? Like qualitative metrics, business cases, they're going to help build momentum. So we have a complex deal. We sell a configure price quote tool. And it definitely involves a lot more stakeholders. It does, you do have to present sort of ROI to get the buy-in because it's a premium price product, right? CPQ isn't cheap. You still have to do the good discovery, but what I can do with a business case builder is literally feed it like any context, call transcripts, emails, whatever it is, so that it can pinpoint like the specific challenges, how we're going to resolve them, what's implementation going to look like, the qualitative metrics, and show the napkin math of how we got that. Put that into Gamma, and then now I put that into Panadoc. I have a business case in 5 minutes, and I just did one yesterday. I had a great call. It was like 40 minutes long. Customer was interested in CPQ. They weren't a buyer. They didn't have authority. He was a great coach, still is a great coach. But we walked through a lot of the qualitative metrics, and I was like, hey, I'm going to develop a business case for you, and we're going to work side by side on it. I'll send it over to today. 40-minute call, 8 minutes, 10 minutes later, after I got through some editing on the presentation, I had a business case. So it's like, that's been extremely successful too. And I've used that multiple times in these more complex deals to multi-thread, say, hey, we've been working with your champion. This is what we've uncovered and how CPQ can solve it. These are the metrics we're looking to solve for. And it's been very well received. So again, AI is there to empower you, to make you a better seller, not to take your job. I think people are fearful that AI is going to take sellers' jobs, but we still need sellers and people to be on the empathetic side, to have that human in the loop, to do things only we're qualified to do, while we can delegate some of the work to AI and just improve and level up our skills.
Signals and triggers only account for 10% of the weight, right? A lot of people talk about signals and triggers. We won't get into that. Those are important. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. That's about 10%. The other, I would say 40% also comes down to photographic, technographic, and also psychographic details of the company, right? Now, what that actually would look like in reality, again, for a ramp, this all starts with product marketing, understanding what a good account, not just an account, but a good customer looks like. Right now, Ramp has enough data. They've been around for a while, so they probably have an understanding of who churns down the line, right? Who's converting, and what does each account look like? So this is GTM work right here, right? This is what Jordan Crawford talks about all the time. I learned a ton from him. I would check him out if I was you guys. Basically, you want to understand these things. So if I have, let's say, 1,000 customers, I want to research all of them, win-loss analysis, customer analysis, all those things to understand how many people in the controlling department do they have? How many accountants do they have? How many finance people do they have? FP&A people? Because There was actually a story I heard from somebody who was doing this for Outreach way back when. Outreach wanted to basically target all B2B SaaS companies. They were like, oh, we just want SaaS. This person who's a GTM engineer, way before it was cool, told them, I don't think you should. You need to target companies that have a complex sales cycle. And what does that look like? If they have more than 4 sales enablement people and more than 4 sales ops people, that indicates there's complexity in the account. So I would prioritize that over, an account like let's say ServiceNow, their SaaS, right? Or I don't know, Brex or Docebo, whoever. So you're trying to narrow these things down. The other thing I'll look at outside of just the headcount, I'm also looking to work with marketing, right? Hey, marketing, like what kind of intent are we seeing from this account, right? This is where I would use a tool like Vector to also see who's coming on our website, or Common Room as well, to de-anonymize that. You want to see the traffic, and then you score the accounts. So you have the marketing, who's opening emails, who's attending the website, going to events, how many SQLs have we had in that account, historically speaking. That's one way. The other piece of this, technographic information. A lot of people like to use Build With. There's actually multiple. By the way, also, if you want, I have like a resource of all tech stacks I've ever used. I'm looking into currently right now. I have that like in a Notion doc. More than happy to send that to the audience. So I get asked about tech stack.
Tell us more. What's in the Notion document?
So in the Notion document, basically, I've broken it down in a format where all the tech stacks of like what I've used, tried, and looking at, and it's organized from like ICP Research Intelligence. You can use Revenue. I'm pretty sure they rebranded. Yeah, Evergrowth. You can use them. Octave is really great for that. Prospecting and list building tools, all linked and organized in that way. Best dialers, best CRMs, things like that. I've organized them that way. And also just like other cool, fun AI tools. Like I use Replit a lot. I use Lovable, Base 44. I haven't hopped into a cursor wave, but that's what's in there. And one of the tools actually to see the competitors, I forgot what, because they rebranded recently. I know it's Nlyft. That's what it's called. EN and then LYFT, like Lyft. You can use those. Those guys are really accurate for competitor knowledge. So I would scrape against that as well to see what tools are they using. Because when you're gathering all this data, now I can pinpoint. If they're using an SAP and we're not better than SAP, I might not want to target that account potentially. Right? But if those other signals outweigh it, meaning there's a lot of people visiting the website, there's past MQLs, they also have, let's say, 15 people in the FP&A department, which historically speaking, based on win rates, that when there's a department that big, that usually means they might not have all the resources or they have too many resources. So there's so many different things you can weigh it based on. So that's kind of how I think about it and how I would use it if I was like working at Ramp at like a high level.
Okay, let's say continue with the example of Ramp for a minute. What else would you look at? So let's say you were given the responsibility of finding new accounts. Let's say finding 1,000 accounts to go after. What else would you look at? You said you look at the technology being used. So for example, if Ramp is competing against a vendor, find out all the companies who are using those vendors, assuming the firmographic has been taken care of. What else would you look at? How else would you score?
So the other, and this was also really important too, because people don't look at basic business models, right? I also made a post about this too. If you are primarily winning deals in B2B, or like actually I have a customer, they're focused on B2C. In theory, there should be no B2B companies in their book of business. Definitely not tier 1 accounts, right? Because they only focus on B2C customers, right? Or customers basically and prospects, right? So that's another important piece. The other two is like digital maturity. Now this one can be depending on what you sell and who. This is where it comes to the psychographics, right? I remember when I was at Brex, I had the Southeast territory, which usually meant oil and gas, manufacturing, retail, and also just the people were slow and steady to the south, right? So trying to sell them on this new advanced analytical platform that can automate and use AI for expense management, they're going to say, yeah, we probably don't need all that. Now, my counterparts, my peers who were in California, all software flying off like the shelf because it was like, California is all like about innovation. So you also have to factor these things in too with territories, right? And the other thing too, I learned this from a couple of people, but one guy in security, which is Tito. I learned a ton from him when I was at Docebo. I basically was getting free mentorship because we're using this license, we're licensing this software. One of the things is like a lot of companies still do territory-based account scoring and carving, meaning if I live in California, right? Or excuse me, if the account is in California, right? And I'm in California, you're going to give it to me, which we all know is unfair. Right? Because imagine if you have Idaho, God forbid, or like Kentucky, right? You probably don't want those accounts. So a lot of people
do that even till today?
To this day.
I knew that, a distribution like this works, but I did not know it works like, hey, Elijah is in Canada, let's give him Canada. What if, there are not many good accounts there? I thought it was always like, hey, you know what? We have geographical distribution. Elijah gets, let's say, 4 particular regions or 4 states. I mean, at least to my understanding, that was the case.
No, believe me, you'll be surprised. It's leaning or it's progressing in the right direction where they're not doing that. But like we have those kind of models, right? And it's almost, this is the weird thing, because when you go to a VP or a director, you're like, hey man, like I'm in Canada, and like, and I'm about to, for the audience, if you guys don't know, 90% of the whole Canadian population lives in the southern border, right? Like majority of Canada is like, it's not habitable. So, imagine having to have Canada as your territory, as an example. I'm Canadian too, by the way, guys, so I'm not shitting on them too hard, but it's not fair, right? It's just like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why can't we just evenly like split it up? Of course, if you're enterprise, I can see the argument that like, hey, it's in person and you got to go face. I get that, but SMB and mid-market, yeah. But again, it's not too many companies that still do that. They're moving, but there's still a shocking amount. It's like saying, who's still using spreadsheets for CRMs after 1,000 employees, right? It shouldn't be. So there's that. But the other thing too, that outside of like just the tech, the headcount of the department, because you need to know not just for headcount growth percentage, but like if someone has 25 accountants for RAM, they're like, hey, they probably have enough resources for someone to manually do the expense reports, right? But if it's like a 10-person company or a 10-person accounting department, but there's like 2,000 people in that company, that's a lot of expense reports. So you want to weigh these things against, what are win losses against companies that have this many people in their account department versus this. You want to factor all those things in. Also open roles too, by the way. Like you want to see open roles, recent hires. You also want to see primary specialties of like some of these companies, right? Now I'm going really deep with this part because some people, like for example, healthcare, I mentioned to you, I really like healthcare because if someone is a general practice versus someone who only focuses on optometry, that's going to be different work track, right? And the way we target and position ourselves can be completely different. So those are just some of the other things too that you would want to check. So yeah, and the actual last thing, there are some people who call or who sell at companies that sell based on the number of fleets and trucks and vehicles you have. I'll just say that, and they can't get the data, right? Like they can't get data for franchises. Also in that resource I can send, there's a lot of good resources for companies that you can basically get data for enrichment or excuse me, the franchises. If it's franchise owned, you can also get parent, parent accounts. That's also another big hard thing. A lot of companies, they'll target the subsidiary of one of Amazon's companies instead of just going for Amazon directly, right? Like that's still a thing, unfortunately. So as long as these problems prevail, I think I'll be around in business for a while too. So I'm not complaining, but.
Talk to me about signals, man. I think everybody is talking about it. I have been with a few data companies myself. Being an SDR leader, I evaluated a bunch of them, 6 Sense, Lintel, whatnot, right? We've been saying signals matter. We've been saying only 3 to 5% of your target market is buying. So let's just target, right? But the question is, like, if everybody has access to the same tools, like what happened to signals? So to walk us through and clarify the confusion for us.
So thank you for bringing that up because that's what I say a lot. So I'm like, if everyone has access to, and I love Common Room, I just help my customers implement it. It's amazing. But at the same time, it's like if we're all targeting people that do job changes, right? That recently got funding, and as Jordan Crawford says, anyone who does the funding base is basically what you're saying to your prospect is, hey, you have money, I like money, give me money, right? That's kind of the joke. So funding, I've never seen that really work, especially, I mean, everything of course is contextual, right? Like I want to just put that disclaimer out. If you're, there's a guy, I forgot his name, Christian Kraus or something like that. I remember during the pandemic, he focused on the Nordics. Is that the northern part of like Europe? He focused on that and startup companies. Now, we all know Europe is usually 5-10 years behind on anything GTM related. So he was talking about, funding. Hey, I noticed you raised this much money. That's new. And it didn't get, I don't want, for lack of better words, corrupted. So people were like, oh, this guy did this research. So he targeted them. I remember he was talking about this before. But nowadays, it's like almost everyone is doing that. But simultaneously, not enough people are doing it. That's actually the funny part. If I'm playing devil's advocate, a lot of people still are not using signals. That's why Common Room is so popular and Clay. A lot of people have not fully operationalized it, right? Maybe there's a couple of reps who are, going on Sales Navigator, manually seeing, okay, people who started in the last 90 days, and then they're checking that monthly to see, right? But Clay can literally do that for you. And Common Room can do that for you, right? Where it just feeds you that new data. So it's helpful, but what I'm a bigger fan of, and this is what I learned a lot from like Jordan Crawford and these guys, is using publicly available data, right? That's proprietary to use. This is basically custom signals, right? That nobody else can copy, right? It's focused on the company and also combining first party data. A lot of people don't use that from their own CRM. Now, granted, we as salespeople, we know CRMs are always dirty and stuff. Like there's still a lot of gold in there, right? So that's just like my thoughts on it. Like it's really played out if you're doing the generic stuff, but it's also not because not enough people are doing it. But if you really want to stand out, custom signals is the way to go. And I can kind of explain like what that would look like.